Hello, it's Ruth and Polston, and here we are again, and I'm just anxious to share with you the good news of the gospel. I have sort of a strange topic tonight, and it's called, Did It Just Happen? I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it just happened. It just happened. Well, I'd like to know what God said about, did it just happen? Or are our lives planned? The Bible said that Jesus Christ, that it was in God's mind that Jesus would die for our sins even before the foundation of the world. So God wasn't caught off guard. It may have looked that way, but God always, always has a plan. But He doesn't leave us out. No. We have to make choices what we're going to do with God's plan, because we're free to do that. So, we are not an accident just waiting to happen. We are a divine plan of God. That ought to give us a little bit of dignity. There's several scriptures I'd like to, one is in Ephesians. The Bible says that we are chosen in Him before the foundation of the world. Then there's another one that said, that's also in Ephesians, where it says, we are ordained to good works before the foundation of the world. That means even our works. Now when it comes down to works, I guess I would say, what do you think your works are? If I was to look at my works, I would say probably most of my life it's been in the music world. And when I graduated from high school, they put in my yearbook, she'll have music wherever she goes. And it was so natural that I hardly even thought about it. And when I was 13, they put me on the piano bench at church. And I wasn't off of it for 50 years. And so it's natural. And God waits for us to take what He has given. What will we do with what God has given? I know one time He said to me, don't just play because you can. You think when you play. And it will sound different to the hearers. So I've tried to remember that. Well, I decided to take a character out of the Bible, and Moses. I love Moses. I'll look forward to seeing him in heaven. But Moses was born of very God-fearing parents, Jochebed and Amram. And he was just a baby, but Pharaoh in Egypt was killing particularly the male babies. He did not want them multiplying to where he was out of control. So he was killing the babies. Now, did it just happen that Jochebed came up with a plan, even her plan? And she would make a basket and put reeds in it that was safe from the water. And it took a lot of faith to put that baby, and told her sister, go and put this in the Nile River. Oh dear, it almost gives me the chills. But she did. Well, Miriam, his sister, went right along and followed the little basket. And pretty soon, Moses, the baby, began to cry. Well, did it just happen? Here comes Pharaoh's daughter. She came down to bathe. And she was curious because she heard a baby crying, and she began to look, and she says, oh, I think that's one of the Israelite babies. And so she watched it for a minute. She felt sorry for the baby, and she didn't have any children, but her heart was so warm toward that baby that she wanted to fish it out of the water, and she did. And just then she said, but what could I do? I couldn't nurse this baby. So little old Marion steps right up and she says, I know somebody that can. And she said, I know the mother. Oh, well, you show me where she lives and we'll talk about it. So the mothers talked. And Jochebed said, if you'll let me nurse my baby for a few years, I promise you he will be your son after that. So she got to nurse her own baby. That's more than the other mothers were doing around there. But she had a lot of faith. It didn't just happen. Okay, now, so as he grew, he, of course, was the grandson of Pharaoh himself. Can you imagine that this little Jewish boy was being put right into the palace, the premier of all Egypt? So here he was growing up, could ride the horses and the chariots, you know, he was big man on the totem pole. But there was something about him. He felt a little bit like a misfit. He didn't know that he was Jewish. And he would go out during the day, and his people would be making bricks for Pharaoh. And so one day it just got to him because this man was carrying heavy bricks, and an Egyptian was beating on him. So he killed the Egyptian. And then he hit him in his hand. And then he looked this way and that way. When you have to look this way and that way, then you're probably looking the wrong way. So it was found out. And when Pharaoh heard it, he said, I'm done. You will not live anymore in my courts. And he says, you are banished from Egypt. He could have killed him. But did it just happen? No. He put him out into Midian. They were not kosher with the people that were of Jewish descent. But did it just happen? He was going along and he saw a well. Well, he needed a drink, and here were some girls. And as it got closer, he saw some of these men of the desert that wanted the water hole for themselves. So they were beginning to mistreat these girls. Well, all the chivalry stood right up on his back, and he came in and he beat them all off. Well, they were so pleased about it that they ran home and they said, come home with us. And our father's name is Jethro. He'll be happy to see you. So when they went home, Jethro said, I want to reward you. I'm going to give you Zipporah, and she's my beautiful daughter, and you can marry her. And he said, as long as you're in Midian, you can live and eat off of my table. All I ask is for you to tend my sheep. So here's this great and mighty Moses. For 40 years, He's wandering from sheepfold to sheepfold, and that's all he does. He just takes care. And then, you know what happened one day? It finally said, after 40 years, he was content to live with Jethro. Now that's kind of scary. When you get content with something that is not your calling, and God has a great calling for you, then it's time for God to say, I think maybe he's learned what he has to learn. So by this time, all of the arrogance, all of the feeling special, it's all drained out of him. And see, God couldn't use the other one. He hit a man in the sand and tried to do it one by one. So here he is now, and he's up at the top of a mountain, and he sees a bush. Did it just happen? No, this bush was unique. It wasn't so much the bush as it was the fire in the bush. And the fire just kept burning, and he thought, well, all the other, when I've seen bushes burn before because of the hot sun, but he said, this doesn't burn up. And all of a sudden a voice came, and the voice had not spoken, but yet he knew who it was. He said, Moses, Moses, I am the God of your fathers, and I have a work for you to do. And by that time he told him to take his shoes off. This was holy ground. And he did. And he had his face to the ground. He says, the job that I have for you is to go back to Egypt. To Egypt? I was happy here. No. He said, I have a great plan for your life. And you are going to be the one that will bring Pharaoh down. Pharaoh? How could that be? He banished me here. Yes. But he said, don't be afraid. He began to make every excuse in the world. I can't speak well. Oh my, he had he didn't have his ducks in a row, and he wanted God to know it. Well, God didn't let up on him. No, he said, you're my man. And usually God can't do much with us until we're in weakness, and then we can become strong. So when he got back to the land, he went before Pharaoh, and he just had a stick in his hand. That's all he took back there. And it was just a bramble that was from the... And so he said, what do you mean, telling me to let the people go? No, he said, absolutely not. What's that in your hand? And when he threw it on the ground, it became a serpent. Aaron was with him. And so he picked it back up. And pretty soon it was a stick again. Well, it wasn't the stick. It was who had the stick. So many times we can get our eyes on the stick. So, about, 10 plagues later? I mean, these were awful. The Nile turned to blood, lice, flies, frogs, you name it, everything, until finally Egypt was absolutely wasted. And so the magicians that helped him out before, they said, this is the finger of God, and we can't do anything about this. Well, he'd never heard that before. But he went on, and every time he'd say, no, I'm not letting him go. No, I'm not letting him go. And finally, it got so bad, and Egypt was so impoverished that he said, the people now want you to go. I don't want you to go, and I'm forbidding it. And so he said tonight, he said the death angel will go through the land of Egypt. It's exactly what happened. And the firstborn male in every home died. That meant that Pharaoh's own son died. And he called Moses in the middle of the night and he said, get your people together. I want them to go. Well, once they had permission, they were in there and they were fixing a lamb and they were celebrating a Passover because God had told Moses, tonight we're going out. And they did. They went out. And the women even had to take the bread that was in kneading before they had even gotten it baked. And so that they had to go out with haste. But you know, the Bible said there was not one feeble among their tribe. Egypt was so glad to get rid of them that the women were taking their very, very expensive jewels and just loading them up. And when they went out, they didn't go out with empty. They went out very, very rich. Well, as they continued then, we find, did it all, that's what I want to ask, did it all just happen? And we know what happened at the Red Sea. So I want to ask you tonight, what do you think about your life? Does it seem like some things have just happened? No, you were not an accident waiting to happen. You were planned. You still are planned. You'll be a plan until God said, I'm through with you and I'm through with the plan I had for you. So be of good cheer. And wish we had more time to talk about Moses. Got the 10 Commandments. I tell you, he led the people through every kind imaginable. He was the one that prayed in the manna that they could have meat to eat as they went across those desert sands. Yes, Moses was a great man. But God looks at you and said, he's great in the gifts that I have given him. Lord, you took the fibers of my being. You molded and protected me before I drew breath. You gave me all I need to walk this earth. You knew what I'd say before I'd say it. You go before and even follow after me. If I take the wings of the morning and try to hide, the Bible said even there, it said, I will follow you. He said, if you try to hide in darkness, still my light shines through. You can never be lost from God's presence. You can never, never get away from his love. Yes, God is there. Ruth Polston from The Life That Wins. God bless. Have a great week.